Welcome to the Sheffield As Bill Says It meeting. This is a main share meeting, and today it is with great pleasure and much gratitude that we welcome Babe Kay from New York, who's come to share for about 40 minutes, after which we'll open up for general sharing or if you'd like to ask a question. Babe, it's wonderful to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Hey, kids, Babe, alcoholic, and yeah, put some kind of timer up or somebody just say, shut the hell up, babe, because I don't know. I might be done in 5 minutes. I might be done in 5 hours. I don't know where we're going to go. I think Mary should do that. That sounded like a guided meditation. I love the way that was read. That calmed me down for about 4 seconds. I get a little enthusiastic about this stuff. Wow. And, well, I'm going to start with a little prayer because it summarizes exactly where I am right now. My Lord God, I have no idea where I'm going. I don't see the road ahead of me. I can't know for certain where it'll end, nor do I really know myself. The fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I'm actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope that I have that desire in all that I'm doing. And it goes on. That's Thomas Merton's prayer. I don't know. Every single morning I wake up saying, good morning, God, here I am, surprise me. And that reading is classic. You know, I mean, Alcoholics Anonymous is the great bait and switch. You know, we come in here just wanting to quit drinking, and then all of a sudden, that's just the bare beginning. And Bill was caught into that dilemma. I suppose I ought to put out some, I don't know if they're credentials or a sob story. My sobriety date's March 2nd, 2002. Stumbled in here, not knowing at all what Alcoholics Anonymous was. I got here totally crushed. I did the one thing in my life that I and nobody else thought would ever do, is hurt my wife. And she came home from work March 2nd, 2002 with a bandage on her arm. And I said, what happened to you? And she said, you don't even know, do you? I said, no, why? She said, that's where you bit me. That's when my whole house of cards came crashing to the ground. I was done drinking. I took step one before I knew what step one was. And I picked up the telephone and called Alcoholics Anonymous helpline. No idea in the world. That's when telephones were still wired to the wall. And God gave me 6 minutes to get to an AA meeting, and I did not find what people say, you know, these spiritual giants. What I ran into were a bunch of people that were seemed to be having fun before the meeting. Then they started talking. And they were all friggin' AA Eeyores. You know, I'm just hanging in there one miserable day at a time. And I wake up every single day with untreated alcoholism. My life sucks, but it's better than what I had. You know, doesn't that sound like Eeyore? That's sobriety being but the barest beginning. And they were the spiritual ones. The rest of them were saying, I just can't stay sober. I know I'm going to die an alcoholic death. And they never even gave me a meeting schedule. I thought there was only one meeting a week of Alcoholics Anonymous in all the world. Monday night at St. Mary of the Angels Church in Olean, New York. I didn't know that you people existed. I didn't know AA was everywhere. And so one meeting a week. And I'm thinking, I was done. I was absolutely done. I can't I can't tell you how low I was. You know, my nickname Babe was a term of endearment. I looked like Babe Ruth, the baseball player, when I was a little kid. And everybody all over knows me as Babe. The only people that called me Jerry were people that wanted money or for me to go to work. But I didn't even deserve my nickname, much less that wife that I'd had all those years through thick and thin and that I bit. And I didn't deserve my beautiful kids. I didn't deserve my beautiful 3-year-old granddaughter at the time. I was so done. I was so empty. I was so crushed. And so I'm listening to these people, and I know now they were trying to help me identify. But I did not need help identifying with being miserable. Been there, done that. Check that box. And I think I'm more miserable than all of you. But I was done drinking. And I didn't know what to do the next week. But I went back. I met my first AA angel, blonde-haired Native American girl. And good old Stacy. She came up, "Hi, my name is Stacy. What's yours?" I said, "My name's Jerry, but my friends call me Babe." And she said, "Well, I'm calling you Babes from now on." And we've been walking this road for over 20 years now. And I'm thinking, well, geez, that Stacy was nice. Maybe I'll go to the meeting again. And she was there, and she was there with a great big Native American guy. And he whacks me in the arm with a big book, my original big book thumper. He says, "You want to get sober? Read this." And I read the book Alcoholics Anonymous 3 times between my second meeting and my third meeting. Remember, there's only one meeting a week. And this was a book of mirrors. I saw myself. I had no idea any of this. 35 years of alcoholic drinking. I was threatening to throw a bar stool through a window, and they decided to call the cops. And I worked for the city, so the cops would just scrape me up and give me a ride home and throw me on my porch. And, one night in jail, and bleeding all over an emergency room, getting in fights, puking in parking lots. That's just so you don't get the idea, that I consider myself an alcoholic because I went to communion 4 times so I could get 4 swallows of wine. That ain't the way it was. I mean, I did all these things for 35 years and never gave it a thought. I remember one guy actually did ask me, "You think we're alcoholic?" And I don't remember what I answered. Probably, I don't care. It was The Alcoholic Life is the Only Life I Know. So I'm reading this book, and I'm reading the doctor's opinion. And, the first thing that got me is the whole alcoholic cycle. And the alcoholic life is the only life I know. Geez, Silky, you went to medical school to tell me that the only life I know is the only life that I have? that ain't rocket science. How else am I? This is the only life I know. It's the only life I will ever know. But I can take your experience and add to my life. So I'm reading this, and I was so thrilled about the allergy. And I mean, I would take a couple of drinks, and it was literally like a button, figuratively, not literally, figuratively like a button on my forehead that gets pushed. And okay, here we go. But if you'd asked me, I would say, that's exactly what I want. But I didn't know people did not experience the phenomenon of craving. How would I know what it feels like to not experience the phenomenon of craving any more than my wife could know what it felt like to experience that? And that's why it says this only happens in people like you and me if you're a real alcoholic. And so it is the only life I knew. And then, it says we have this spiritual experience and yada, yada, yada. But I mean, the doctor's opinion was, full flight from reality. It's where it says we can be perfectly normal in all our affairs except when it comes to alcohol. On the surface, I was Jekyll and Hyde. I was a boss. I was a good father. I was a good person. And then every single night, I didn't have carpet slippers, but out would come my bottle and a novel. And I would get lost. I'd drink all night long, lost in a novel. And the thing says, it's full flight from reality. You can't get much further from reality than being loaded on the edge of blacking out and passing out in a novel. There is absolutely no reality there. And that was every single night. And then the weekends were for partying, and that's when I got to be dangerously antisocial. But so I'm drinking that way. And now all of a sudden that is gone. I'm thrilled to find out I'm an alcoholic. And the where it says the 1,000 vain attempts and not wanting to be an alcoholic. Remember, I was happy as could be. I know what's wrong with me now. How cool is that? And I even asked Kate, who was my wife, I asked her a few times, did I ever once suggest that I quit drinking or that I should quit drinking? She said, no, I didn't. So I can't relate to that page, all those attempts switching I would switch from beer to wine and brandy, and I'd switch to whatever's in front of me. I'm pretty eclectic. As long as there's alcohol, sign me up. But it was never to control and enjoy my drinking. I loved it. I loved the moment before the blackout. Blackout sucks because you're not present, and then you have to wait for the phone calls the next morning to find out if you had any fun. And isn't it something, the phone calls the next morning, nobody ever called and said, "Babe, you were so much fun. I wish you could be like that all the time." I was dangerously antisocial. And that's how my drinking went. And so I get to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm reading Bill's story. And Bill wanted to prove to the world that he was something. He took up golf, not so much to really catch up with Walter Hagen. He liked hanging out in the country club because he was just a lower middle class boob like I am. And, but he liked hanging out in the fancy country club, whirling those fat checks in front of the skeptical banker. And he wanted to have that impeccable coat of tan. What he wanted is Lois to say, "Oh, look, there's my boy Billy, ain't he wonderful?" And Bill, who thought so highly of himself, came crashing and burning. And page 6, I'm reading that, and God, I didn't know who this Bill guy was. I thought he was going to die. In fact, the first time I read his story, I'm thinking, when is this guy going to get killed off? I should have known that I didn't know what was in this book. And, Bill's afraid to jump out the window, afraid to cross the street, terror, bewilderment. Sounded like a bottom. I'm thinking, this guy's getting to the end. Then he says, this went on for 2 more years. God damn, will you finally die off? I want to find out what the rest of this book is about. And where did Bill hit bottom? When he heard the doctors talking to Lois. And Bill, you're just going to follow the endless procession of sots. You're just a plain old garden variety drunk. He who had thought so highly of himself. And then we get to page 8, and my story and Bill's story went crashing together. I was not relating to Bill. I could relate to, people are jumping off the towers of high finance, and his, not me. I'm going to the bar. I'm with you there, buddy. And the arguments in their sumptuous apartment, our arguments were there, but our apartment was not sumptuous. And Bill talking and spending in thousands and talking in millions. Yeah, that didn't happen. So I was not, and that's all, and to the end, that's what Bill wanted. He was chasing emotional sobriety. And that's this reading. Is quitting drinking what we're here for? Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And Bill was caught on the horns of that dilemma. And the thing is that that's our typical dualistic thinking. Is it to stay sober or is it to have a spiritual experience? The answer is both, you boob. It's not either or, but we don't know that. It's good or bad, black or white, right or wrong. That's my pride. That's my judgmentalism. And when that got shattered, Bill said he thought of his poor wife. There were good times after all. And you remember, I got here because I bit the love of my life. But that was over now. What he wouldn't give to have that back. And then this, I believe, is the most beautiful description of a bottom that no words can express. That's why we have to talk in metaphors, because if you've experienced this, the words make sense. If you've never experienced it, I might as well be talking Russian. Unless you're Russian, then I should be talking Chinese. But, no words can express the loneliness, the despair, the bitter morass of self-pity. Oh, my God, I told you how I felt that I didn't even deserve my nickname. That's lonely. That's just desperation. Pitiful, incomprehensible. I don't know, and I don't care, but I must care because I wouldn't feel so horrible. But I got here I'm done drinking. Now what? And Bill, when he's on one of the horns, the sobriety one, the third tradition. Our only requirement is a desire to stop drinking. And he says, in Problems Other than Alcohol literature, sobriety, freedom from alcohol, I think is how he said it. I actually dug that out. It's a great little pamphlet, by the way. So yeah, sobriety, freedom from alcohol through the teaching and practice of the 12 steps is the sole purpose of an AA group. So here we are, we're supposed to teach you how to quit drinking. But is that all? The As Bill Sees It that I picked. It's the barest of beginnings. I'm never going to have the spiritual experience if I'm still living at the bottom of a bottle. But isn't that something? People take all these drugs, and I actually would have bet that you could have a spiritual experience the closer you were to. In fact, I almost wrote a paper in college about the closest we ever are to God is the moment before we pass out. So I would have told you, you can have a spiritual experience as the result of drinking. I was so wrong. But if I was so right, I wouldn't be here talking to you guys today. My best ideas, I say our original AA slogan was, it seemed like a good idea at the time. The cops didn't think so. The society didn't think so. The guy that ran the liquor store thought so. So what seemed like a good idea is what almost killed me. And so quitting drinking, and through that, the whole thing in the book, because remember, Bill was all on fire with the spiritual thing. He had that white light experience in Towns Hospital. The 11 of the 12 steps are just there on that one page while he's sitting there in the hospital. And the ice of the wind, cool breeze flew and shit flew, wind blew, however he says it, and then stumbled Bill. That's not how that reading goes. But he had that huge spiritual experience. And Silky says, man, something's different about you. Whatever it is, keep it up. Didn't know what the heck it was. And so here comes Bill, when Ebby shows up and Ebby says, get your own conception of God. And the scales of pride and prejudice fell from his eyes. Good, Bill's going to get it. No, he didn't. He's back in Charlie Towns Hospital. Then he has that white light experience. And you think, now he's got it. Now he's got it. Read right across the page. Now they finally said, Bill, you got to go home now. It was like last call at Towns Hospital. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. And so here's Bill, lonely, despairing, depressed, and his depression was so bad. I mean, he'd get in a fetal position under his desk. Bill was a depressed human being, and he'd be overwhelmed with this. And what did he do? Did he pray? Did he do an inventory? No, it says he got up off his butt and went back to the hospital and talked to another alcoholic, and there he was miraculously set on his feet. This is the way of life beyond our wildest dreams. I wake up early and meditate. I get up and sing a couple songs of praise. I say some prayers, 3rd-step prayer, 7th-step prayer, and I'm practicing what's my friend, Father Dan Hurley, God rest his soul. The last thing Dan Hurley said to me is, babe, God's light shining in you. And then the old guy died. Not that moment. It was like a month or two later. But here he's saying that Dan Hurley wrote a book. He's a Franciscan priest, and it's called The Franciscan Lectio, how St. Francis and St. Clare viewed the Word. Before there was a Bible, how Francis and Clare looked at the world. It's their prayer and meditation technique. And it's to observe. And then they would get, or she called it gaze. They would gaze in the eyes of the crucified Christ in San Damiano Church, and his eyes were open. You've probably all seen it where the Christ on the cross has those great big brown eyes, creepy. But they gazed into those eyes and were given thoughts. I would like to say vision, but that sounds a little too woo-woo-wooey. And so they gazed, and then they would meditate. They would think about what had just been given them. Meditation, focus my thinking. I learned transcendental meditation in college. I learned it because I heard you could get the equivalent of 8 hours sleep in an hour. So I'm alrighty, and I did biofeedback, I did mantras, mudras, I did yoga, kundalini, pranayama, mantras, mudras, chakras, with and without colored lights, Om Mani Padme Om. And people think that's meditating. That's the vehicle to get me to meditation, where I get that's the gaze part. That's to open my mind. God, tell me what you want me to think about now. And meditation is to focus my thinking. The 30-second dictionary example was a general will meditate on the upcoming battle. I'm not supposed to shavasana, melt into the floor and let my spirit go into the universe, which I did and still do. Don't get me wrong, I still love that practice, but I did it so I could I could drink full-time, work full-time, and go to school full-time. So meditation alone is not going to, it allowed me to stay drunker. And so they meditate. What do you want me to think about, God? And then they've added contemplio, contemplation. And in contemplation, they would take what they were given in meditation and ask to go into God's world, detach from myself, which is what Bill learned in step 6, to detach from my life and look down on my life with no strings attached and contemplate what does that mean and what is it going to mean in my life today. And so this morning's meditation, I won't get into that, but I got meditating on the difference between being spiritual and spiritual being. You know, the Monica's Build a God program. Write down what you think God is. And those are just characteristics. But that is not God. Deep in the heart of every man, woman, and child is this fundamental idea of a spiritual being. So I can be spiritual, but I will never be a spiritual being while I'm still in this meat vessel. I'm still mixing it up with God's word. And I told myself I'm not going to go into that because it was a fun meditation, and those of you that get my little text, it didn't really go anywhere. And I do these contemplations, and then I try to condense them into 2 paragraphs because all my friends are low attention span, and I send them out to like 100 people, and so I'm thinking, what is the spiritual being? And how do I do this stuff? And that's the second part of this reading, that we can go through anything if I'm in the world of the spirit. That's contemplation. Yeah, my wife's got cancer, and I could meditate on it. And she did. Most of you have heard my story, so we'll kill off Kate quickly. But for 15 months, after we found out she had cancer, I got to sit with her. She spent one night in the whole 15 months, probably longer than some of you have been sober. Sat next to her, watch her waste away to nothing. But every single morning I would wake up, morning, God, here I am, surprise me. And it worked out good. God got up first, I got up second, Katie got up third. Every single day, morning sunshine, got a smile for me. Every day we laughed. Those 15 months, including the day she died, right here where I'm sitting. We didn't want to know the prognosis. Thank God I didn't. You know, everybody wants to go on Google Doctor and find the miracle cure. I learned to quit praying for that years before. And another Katie story. God, she was God's little demonstration of his power, his love, his way of life. But she was in intensive care. Whole different surgery, a whole different everything. That I'm sitting there praying. God, let her be good. You know, we've had such a beautiful life together. Things are going so good. Please let her live. And God was out fishing or bowling with angels. I don't know what he was doing, but he sure wasn't talking to me. And so I went home, and then the next day I got up and I did my prayer, my meditation, and went back to the ICU. And I'm saying, God, she's been on this respirator for 3 or 4 days. If she's going to be a vegetable, take her home with me. Then I figured, well, God's out there on that beach with the naked girls in the 12 and 12, because he wasn't there in that ICU with me. And I went home then the third day. I like to say on the third day, Babe rose again. So I do, I guess, have this ideation of being a spiritual being. But anyway, I got up and I found this beautiful little prayer. God's love enfolds me. His light surrounds me. His power protects me. Wherever I am, God is. And I was doing that like a mantra in the ICU, and I felt the presence of God. I felt God's love enfold me. I didn't really see the light, and I didn't feel the hug, but I did with my heart. But, you know, I know quite a few schizophrenics, and I know the ones that hear the voices and other people that hear the voices in their heart. But that to me, so I learned to don't be praying for the outcome. So Kate's got her cancer going, didn't ask. And the radiation doctor, sweet little guy. His name was Hare, like the rabbit, and he was just a little rabbit of a guy. And he comes out crying, babe and Katie, this just breaks my heart to tell you there's nothing else we can do. And this was 14. She had lasted another month, but he said, you know, if you'd asked me 14 months ago how long Katie had, I would have told you no more than 3 months. Just think if I'd asked for a prognosis. Those 15 months, we wouldn't have laughed every day. Right here, right now, this is the moment we got. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And that reading says we can go through pain, we can go through heartbreak, we can go through sorrow, we can go through anything with peace, love, joy, most of all gratitude, I guess most of all love, and the love that is God in our hearts toward every one of God's kids, to see the face of God. You know, I don't want to become Mother Teresa, but and St. Francis and Clare, you know, working with the lepers. Everybody else threw stones at the poor goose. They'd hug them. We hang out with the guy, the dregs of the earth, or the salt of the earth. We hang out with all-time losers in Alcoholics Anonymous. And isn't that the greatest paradox? We turn out to be the all-time winners. This meeting started to take a moment to think about why we are here. Why am I here? Someone at this meeting would contemplate suicide. Why am I here? Why am I here? What does Bill say in the 12 and 12? The 12 steps are a set of principles spiritual in nature that if practiced as a way of life, first of all, get you sober, remove the obsession to drink, but then allow you and me to live happy and usefully whole. That's why it's a way of life, not just a life. You and me walking together, page 100, when we look back, we realize that when we turned our life into, put our life in God's hands, remarkable things happen. Where did we read about that? Way back in step 3 before I knew it could even happen. There's just a little bit of hope, a little glimmer of hope that there is a life beyond just putting the plug in the jug. And we get to do that, you know, and that's where Bill was so torn. You know, we agnostics, he talks about, you know, we're going to sober him up. It's like a sales pitch. They even told him, we're giving this guy the business. We're going to get him sobered up. And why? Because if I get you sober, I'll stay sober. Or even if I don't, I'll stay sober. And what a pathetic way to live, Bill. Maybe that's why Bill struggled so much with emotional sobriety, because he was still stuck on the get you sober part of it. But he wrote the book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And then he wrote the True Confessions book, the 12 and 12. Beautiful experience that Bill got once he got a spiritual awakening. And that's where he gets into the part that I like, the mushy part of this stuff, this joy, this love that we get to share. I was at another meeting. I got to talk for 45 minutes on love. And Merton, so many people, that God is love. And isn't that it? Home, what's deep in each of our hearts is this idea of love. And, and the prayer of St. Francis, that's become my marching orders. The book tells us your job now is to be the place where you can be a maximum. Comes right out and says your job now is. What's my job? Your job is to be put in the place where you can be a maximum service to God and my fellows. Why do we make the amends? It's the gym program. It's how we fit ourselves to be a maximum service to God and our fellows. I can't carry around all that pain that I caused in my life and pretend that I can help you. It's not that I get anything, I learned to forgive myself. I can't make amends till I forgive myself. I'm pretty sure in the prayer of St. Francis, it says it is by forgiving that we are forgiven. That it's better to love than to be loved. I almost picked that. I think it's page 34 in as Bill sees it. Outgoing love, the finest of human emotions. When we're falling in love, it's, oh my God, she loves me, she loves me. We can rip the petals off a daisy. She loves me not. We were always looking for stuff for us. Selfish, self-centered. And what do we learn in here? To become other-centered. That you are actually more important than me because you are a part of me. Our friend here has her God blanket. Everyone is like a thread. The other place the fabric is mentioned is in fears. Fear, the evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence is shot through with it. But when we get to step 5, we get this. It's a beautiful image. Thanks, Mo. Everybody all over the world is stealing Monica's God blanket. But we're wrapped in this blanket of God, this blanket of love that we can actually trust another human being. I don't have to have any secrets anymore. How's that for freedom? And it says we find God right there in the 5th step. The drink problem seems to have been gone. Cool beans, I'm done. That's only step 5. Now I got to start, kids. Here we go. Now I get to aim toward the perfection which is of God. I don't have to work on my character defects. I'm aware of them. But what do I do? We can use the 4 absolutes. I happen to use the prayer of St. Francis. Am I bringing hope, joy, light, love, compassion, understanding, forgiveness to every single human I know? Somebody sent me an email before there was such thing as text. And it's Ayakema that says it. Unless we practice loving feelings toward everyone we meet day in and day out, we're missing out on the most joyous part of life. And she sent me that little quote. And she said, babe, that's you. When I go to the grocery store, Bill says new mysteries, new joys, new adventures. My body is falling apart. My arthritis is so bad I can barely get my butt to the bathroom. And my butt is behind me, so I got to push the whole rest of me all the way to the bathroom. And God likes a laugh. I got the 75-year-old prostate, so I got to really pee. And my knee says, so what? I ain't going to let you walk. And so I'm hobbling to the bathroom one morning, and I'm saying the 3rd step prayer. I go, God, I offer myself to thee. And I laughed right out loud. I said, God, you sure you even want me? I'm a bloody wreck. God says, keep trudging, Bucky. Don't pee down your leg. And that's what this recovery is about. And I get to mix it up with God's kids. I'm almost homebound. And, I've found 700 speakers. I've met thousands of people. Here I am, all of you people from all over the world. What a small world this is. What a big God blanket it is. We're all just wrapped up together in this life of happy and usefully whole. To be whole no matter what. So through the pain, I just explained the pain. But does that mean I got to be miserable? Some people are. But I love hobbling to the grocery store, and everybody's so, if I remember to bring my cane, everybody's so nice. They like gimpy old guys. But, if I'm hobbling along, but if I'm not in a hurry, everybody's so nice. If my leg is really, really hurting, they'll say, line's back there. And, okay. But, going to the grocery store is an adventure. If I have to get more than 3 things, I better make a list because I'm going to start talking to somebody. People actually want to smile. Look I'm watching Lucy smile. She's smiling. Bring a smile to somebody's face. They might be having a miserable day, and you can make them feel that they're not alone in this thing. I love the story, that the guy at the 8 items checkout, and I am that old guy. Actually, no, I stick to the rules pretty much. But, you can stand behind that person and don't they know I'm in a hurry? Look, he's got 10 items. And that's not very spiritual. Or you can be a little more spiritual and say, gee, the poor old guy, it's probably the only time he gets to the grocery store, and God forgive him for having 10 items in the 8 items checkout list. That's a little more spiritual. The spiritual answer is quit counting the guy's groceries. Quit judging my fellows. This is God's kid too. The face of God is in every single one of us. And Mother Teresa saw it most beautifully in the ugliest of us. Francis and Clare found it in the face of the lepers. We find it in the face of beat-up drunks. But we also find it in the face of a newborn baby. We find it in Merton's little yellow flower beside the road. In its own way, is singing God's praise even though nobody even notices it. That's detachment. I like to use my maple tree as a spiritual being. It's doing its thing for God and doesn't even know it. We're blessed and cursed with the knowing. And that's what we learn. That's why, I'm just having a bad day. No, I'm not. That was in meditation through Kate's cancer. Big lesson I got. God took me in the contemplative part of that meditation, as I was thinking about the dark night of the soul that Merton talks about, when prayer even seems impossible. I'm still laughing. We're still having this joyful life, but in my heart, the love of my life is wasted away and dying. My daughter got her a coloring book, and my wife was an artsy kind of person, got her a coloring book, and she scribbled like a 2-year-old toward the end. The night she spent in the hospital, they injected her spine with like epoxy because the cancer had eaten away her backbone, and I couldn't even pick her up and put her on the commode without causing her this agony. And so they super glued her back together, but to pick her up and put her on the pot every single day, being a caregiver is so hard. Being a caregiver was the most beautiful 15 months of my life. I got to love this woman more and more and more, but it's so painful to watch her, this crafty, beautiful person waste away to nothing. And so I was in this dark night of the soul in the meditation. And then when I went into contemplation and looked down on it from God's point of view, God says, babe, in my world, somebody's saying, this is the best day of my life. I fell in love. We're going to have a baby. I won the lotto, whatever. And from that moment to this very moment, I realized I don't have bad days. I only have selfish days. Why do I want her to live? So she can be happy, so she can be a vegetable, or just as I don't want to lose the love of my life? Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our problems. Get off your ass and help one of God's kids. And all of a sudden, we realize that it is a perfect world. Just because things aren't going Babe's way does not mean that it's not perfect. That's where pain is the touchstone of spiritual growth. Well, that sucks, but it's true. When I find out that the world is absolutely perfect, that even that poor soul that's relapsed, the poor soul that's come to the end, reached the jumping off point and actually jumps off, how can that be perfect? And oh God, trust me, I am no spiritual giant when it comes to that stuff. That could trip my trigger when somebody says, "Oh, I guess some of us just have to die to teach the rest of us a lesson." Well, you son of a bitch, go out there and help someone, and maybe they won't jump off the bridge. I was at a meeting, and this woman was in really bad shape, and I found out where she was, so I was going to get the women to go get her, and all these women at the meeting, oh, she knows where we are. If she wants it bad enough, she'll come back. So I scooped up my sponsor. My sponsor happens to be a woman, and she's a nurse, so she brought her blood pressure cuff with her, and we went and saw that girl and got her into the intensive care unit. The rest of them would have been, well, she knew where we were. She just needed to get here. And then there was angel music that says, "Time's up." That's my new higher power. Time's up. Used to be tits up, but now it's time's up. All right. Thanks, kids. Love ya.